Have you ever been so profoundly saddened by an event? Something you've seen, something you've heard, something you've witnessed? Something that induces that overwhelming feeling of anxiety? I'm having that right now a little bit. It's that pressure that sits on your chest that you can't quite take a deep breath. That feeling that drives you into motion, that you need to do something, do anything, and you're not sure what to do. It's that call to action from inside your heart, from anger, from frustration, from sorrow. It's those base emotions. You want to shake, you want to scream, you want to cry, you want to pray. You want magic powers to shoot out your fingers to fix the situation. We've all felt this to varying degrees, whether it be a little thing or a big thing. Sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's professional, sometimes it's political. Sometimes it's happening to you, to your family, to your friends, to your community, and often to total strangers. It's that voice inside you that cries out for you to help, to change, to intervene. Maybe a small thing, or it could be a big thing like your world is on fire. Our world seemed to be on fire on 9/11/2001. I was mesmerized by that tragedy. My skin crawled, my emotions leaked out of my eyeballs. I was sick to my stomach as I watched that happen. I knew with all of my being that I needed to help, but I didn't know how to help. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. See, I was a paramedic during that time. And I'd just gotten off the night shift and was listening to the news of the Twin Towers falling on the radio. And I did the only thing that I knew how to do. I went home, packed up my pugs, put a clean uniform on, and went back to work and waited. I knew people were suffering, and I knew people needed rescued, and I knew they needed help, and with every fiber of my being, I wanted to go help them, and I didn't know how to make that happen. I watched as my brothers and sisters went through a horrific event, and I did nothing to help them. And I regret not figuring out how to volunteer, how to get from Billings, Montana to somewhere that needed help. Do you remember how you felt on 9/12? I want to live more like that. I want to live more like we felt on 9/12, that connected unity. Elizabeth Gray says, I never want another 9/11. But on 9/12, what mattered more was the unity in us than what divided us. I vowed to recognize that feeling, that urge, that need to serve, and act on it anytime I felt it. I needed to remember to turn that sadness into service. The longest journey you will ever take is the 18 inches from your heart to your head. Turning that feeling in your heart into thought, and those thoughts into actions, from your heart to your head to your hands. I listened to that instinct and that feeling and that sadness when Katrina made landfall in August 2005. 175-mile-an-hour winds. More people than in the state of Wyoming were displaced. 1.1 million people were evacuated. The Gulf Coast descended into chaos, and I listened. I watched, and I felt that sadness again. It wrecked my heart, and my anxiety again leaked out of my eyeballs. I watched and felt in fear and sadness, and I knew I needed to help. And I knew this time I needed to figure out how to help, how to volunteer, how to get from here to there. When the American Ambulance Association put out the call for help, I was the first to stand in line. I was the first to say, I volunteer, pick me. I volunteer as tribute, put me in, coach. My operations manager said, there's one problem. And I'm like, there's only one? We can deal with that. The one problem is I had 4 hours to pack. I had no idea how long I was going to be gone. I didn't really know where I was going. But I had 4 hours to figure out how to take care of my life, how to take care of my dogs, my home, how I was going to pay my bills, how I was going to take care of my full-time job. This was just my part-time job. One problem. I made some phone calls, and we drove. We drove through the night, 100 miles an hour. We drove to Denver. We drove to Denver in ambulances from Billings so the ambulances could be put on flatbed trailers and drove into Louisiana. And we got on an airplane. We got an ambulance from Houston, the ambulance base in Houston, and we drove into Baton Rouge. In Baton Rouge, I found a people with a heart for service, like I've never seen before. I learned that Southern hospitality truly is an amazing thing. I was there to rescue people, to do a hard job that not many people could do or were trained to do. I have a special set of skills. By the time we made it into New Orleans, into Louisiana, to stand in the gap between crisis and security, to stand in the gap between chaos and change for a whole bunch of people that I'd never met, in a place I'd never been. When we got into New Orleans, we found chaos. It was the Wild West. We did door-to-door evacuations. There was chaos at the convention center. It was martial law. So many people wanted to help, and they felt that sadness, and they had no idea what to do. And because I listened to that sadness, I found myself one of 8 people, 4 ambulance crews, running the 900 and some 911s that we're holding in New Orleans. Out of all the millions of people in the world, I was one of 8 responding to 911s on dry ground in New Orleans. We worked long hours and we were so tired. And because of martial law, and it was just completely unsafe for us to be in New Orleans, we had to be escorted in and out by the National Guard. We couldn't stay overnight. We'd leave at dusk, and New Orleans would descend into chaos and tear itself apart again. Because of that act and the Martial Law Act, we had to stay in Baton Rouge, and we stayed at a Knights of Columbus Hall attached to a Catholic church. And when people figured out we were there, they started showing up. At first, they started bringing us cookies because it's what they could do to deal with the sadness in their own hearts. And then as the neighborhood figured out that we were there, they got themselves organized and they started cooking us food. You'd show up in the middle of the night and there'd be some good old boy with a big old pot of jambalaya in the front yard waiting for you and to feed you. They couldn't step into the gap to help, but they could sure support us. We were working 16 to 18-hour days, and we'd come back in the middle of the night, and there was always someone to feed us, someone to greet us, and someone to say thank you. Selfless giving so we could move forward on to the next day, helping us so we could help others. Sometimes in the middle of the night, people would drive up to the hall and yell out their car window and say, "Hey, does anybody need a shower?" Because we didn't have a shower, we didn't have a kitchen, we didn't have anything. We just were sleeping on FEMA cots in a big room. And you'd get in a total stranger's car, and they'd drive you to their house, and you'd take a shower. And they'd offer to do your laundry, and your laundry would magically show up the next day when you got off shift, clean, with a snack and a thank you note. This picture was taken on September 9th, 2005, at the MASH Evacuation Hospital outside the Convention Center in New Orleans. This picture was my birthday. My birthday is September 9th, and I was assigned to the MASH Evacuation Hospital at the Convention Center. At this point, the National Guard and the active duty military was fully involved in the crisis, the largest deployment of military on American soil. Somehow the doctors that we were working with, the Navy doctors, realized that it was my birthday, and they invited me and my clown posse, a crew, to go have dinner on the Iwo Jima that was moored outside the Convention Center. The Iwo Jima was the only working hospital we had in New Orleans. was also the flight control center and many other things. At the MASH hospital, we worked long hours and we did amazing things, and most people were evacuated through there. I went to dinner that night with my friends on the Iwo Jima, and I got cake. And my friends sang me happy birthday. And I stood on the flight deck of the Iwo Jima and looked out over the city of New Orleans as the sun went down to total darkness. And it was beautiful, but it was so sad. You could hear no cars, you could see no lights, you could hear helicopters and an occasional gunshot. When I got home and went back to work the next day, I called my mom. And I told her my friends, the Navy, had given me my birthday dinner and that I'd gotten cake. And she started crying. I was like, why are you crying? Cake's amazing. Cake solves everything. And she said that morning in her prayer group that were praying for me every day, her one prayer request was that on my birthday, in the middle of a crisis, with no power, no running water, was that I would get cake. On September 10th, we were again running 911s on the dry ground in New Orleans, and I went to a place I've only ever been once. This was the time. It's the place where the party never stops, the party never sleeps, Bourbon Street. This is a picture I took. I looked left, and I looked right, and I was standing in the middle of Bourbon Street, and I was the only person standing there. 9/11 rolled around, and that's a big day for all of us. It's a sad day. It's a day of memory. We all know that 9/11 was going to be a heavy day, and we had the opportunity to be attached to a fire unit. See, there's water everywhere, but it's not in the right places. And as the water receded, people realized that they'd lost everything. They were sneaking into the city, realizing that their homes and their businesses were gone. They had no flood insurance, so mysteriously, stuff started to catch on fire. We called it the burning time. And during the burning time, we had fire trucks from all over the United States. It was amazing. You'd see miles and miles of fire trucks coming into the city and into the Gulf Coast to help. We had to take all of our water everywhere we went to put those structure fires out. So it was like a parade every time there was a structure fire. And at the very end of that parade was always a paramedic unit. And that day I was the paramedic unit. I was happy to do that, not because I wanted to be hanging out with those firemen on 9/11, but because, no shade to firemen, I know there's some in here. Firefighting is 95% boredom followed by 5% chaos, and this girl needed a nap. So as we sat around on 9/11 at the fire station with our lines and lines and lines of firemen, I noticed a gentleman sitting outside, leaning against the fire hall with his elbows on his knees and his hands in his head, and I listened to that sadness, that sorrow, that call inside of me and said, go talk to him. He might need a friend. And I sat down beside him and I said, hard day. And he sat up a little bit straighter and took a deep breath, and when he did that, on the front of his blue t-shirt, no idea why firemen always wear blue t-shirt, maybe somebody can tell me that someday, it said New York City Fire Department on it. And he said, today is a hard day. And I said, yeah. And he took that big deep breath and he looked at me and he said, I was off today. And I knew that today he was talking about was 9/11/2001, not today. He said, I responded into the fire hall from my home to find out every single person that was on duty was dead. And I said, why are you here? Why aren't you home? And he said, I knew I had to come. I knew I had to come and help. He said, not even 18 hours after the terrorist attacks, I was standing on the stack and I picked something up to hand to the guy behind me. And the guy behind me was a New Orleans City fireman. And I looked at him and said, thanks, and kept digging. Not even 10, he said, not even 10 to 12 hours after us needing help, these guys, and he tapped on the building we're leaning on, showed up to help. I'm here to pay him back. I'm here to help. That's why I was there. I was there to help. There's no need to be a paramedic. There's no need to be a firefighter. There's no need to be a military worker to help. During the pandemic, you can be a checker at a grocery store and be a hero. You can be the one that bakes cookies. You can be the one that prays. You can be someone who says thank you. You can be someone who listens. You can be someone who encourages. You can be someone who just does something to fix the situation. By helping others, you actually help yourself. Remember, everything can be gone in a second. But are those things really the things that matter? The blessings of the Lord make us rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. Move forward, friends. Recognize that feeling and turn that feeling into action and turn your sadness into sorrow. Thank you.